The announcement crackled through the intercom, just as the engines roared to life. Ladies and gentlemen, do not panic, but no one leaves this aircraft. Evelyn froze, coffee trembling in her hand as the aisle lights flickered red. Across the cabin, a man in a gray suit unbuckled his seatbelt with eerie calm. Outside, the runway crew had stopped moving entirely. Every face turned toward the plane. And then, through the static, came a single phrase that changed everything. She's on board. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. The morning she found the folded note, Evelyn Clark thought the cabin lights were still on in her head. She had woken before her alarm, the kind of wakefulness that felt like a bruise, sharp and slow to heal. Outside her window, the sky was the tired gray of late autumn, the kind of sky that did not promise much. She made tea she did not want, dressed in the Navy uniform that still smelled faintly of perfume and airplane coffee. And then she smiled at herself in the mirror, the way a person practices a face they must wear for other people. Evelyn had been a flight attendant long enough to know how to look calm when everything inside her was not. Her name tag caught the light, Evelyn C. The letters were small and precise, like the rules she lived by. She ironed the collar until the fabric shone, smoothed her hair into a neat bun, and tucked the folded paper into the pocket beside her lip balm, as if it were another small duty to keep. There were two voices in the world when Evelyn moved through the airport. One was the practical voice, the list maker that checked bags and boarding passes. The other was the small, softer voice that kept count of everything she had lost and everything she still owed. The practical voice told her the flight would be busy but routine. The softer voice hummed a number, a balance, a total, a future she worried might never be hers. She learned to feed the practical voice first. It was easier to serve strangers than to hold her own mistakes. On the way to Gate 12, the concourse smelled of heated concrete and pretzel salt. Travelers moved in bands, each group carrying their own small dramas. A child wailed like a bell, then stopped when the mother lifted her into a stroller. Somewhere a grandfather clicked a camera with the careful, embarrassed pride of someone who wanted proof that he had left the house. Evelyn watched them with the practiced detachment of someone who had learned to separate herself from what she saw. It was a skill. It allowed her to help. She kept the folded note in the pocket all morning because touching it made her feel prepared. The note was short. Remember who you are. Don't lose the uniform. It was anonymous, written in a hurried hand. She could not place it. At first she thought it might be a joke left by a colleague. Then she thought of her mother, who had once said the same words and always meant them kindly. The note warmed and pinched at the same time. It reminded Evelyn that her uniform was more than cloth. It was proof that she could still be relied upon, even when life had a way of unraveling the edges. Her supervisor, Mark Hale, met her at the jet bridge with a nod that was all business. Mark was the kind of man who never let an engine roar into his composure. He had a face like pressed linen and a voice that kept its edges. "Busy flight," he said. 312 seats, full. 2 families with infants. Be ready. Evelyn listened to him and stored the information. She tightened her smile by a half degree and took a breath. The airplane smelled of lemon disinfectant and warm plastic. Seats sat like folded hands. Passengers were still finding places to put their bags, exchanging apologies in a dozen languages. There is a thin moment before takeoff when everything on a plane is possible and nothing is decided. At that moment, the flight attendant is an architect of safety and space. Evelyn walked the aisle with the practiced rhythm of someone who had performed this choreography 1,000 times. Hands poised to help, to calm, to instruct. Her voice, when she spoke to the passengers, was both public and private. She used it to anchor others, because when she anchored them, she anchored herself. The narrator watching her felt something else that morning, a quieter curiosity. This voice did not rush to explain. It let gestures hang in the air. The way Evelyn smoothed the quilted blanket in an older woman's lap. The way she adjusted a toddler's seatbelt with a tenderness of someone who knew the small muscles of care. The narrator noticed the quick, involuntary flinch when she saw a man with loud shoes. A flinch born not from fear, but from habit. Evelyn's life had taught her to notice patterns. Habit was a kind of map. Sometimes a map kept you safe, and sometimes it led you in circles. She had not always been so careful. Once she had flirted with reckless choices like other young people do, thinking the world would bend around enthusiasm. That had changed. A long shift of nights and missed birthdays had taught her the value of steady wages and steadier hands. Flights became a ledger. Miles for rent, tips for groceries, overtime to pay back debts that were like small black holes in her bank account. A man in business class, who wore a suit like armor, asked for a ginger ale and a newspaper. Evelyn responded with a practiced ease and a small touch of humor that opened his face into a human expression. "You look like you could use a better paper than what's in first class," she said, and he laughed in a way that lifted something behind his eyes. Moments like that were why she loved the job. For brief intervals, she could move people toward comfort, and that made everything else feel less heavy. Yet there was an undercurrent of anxiety she didn't voice. A week before, a familiar passenger had filed a complaint about a minor mistake, an unreturned magazine, a misunderstanding about a seat change. The airline's response had been quick and sufficient. The quiet formalities of reprimand were the invisible things that could carve at a person's confidence. Evelyn held on to her uniform like armor, because everything else often felt small and breakable. She moved to the rear galley to check the stock. The galley was a cramped, humming place that smelled of coffee grounds and foil. Tins clinked together like coins, a sound that made her think of cash registers, and the way money could feel real and then slip away. Evelyn counted cups and towels, eyes scanning for misplaced items. Her hands worked the way hands that had memorized slow rituals work, precise, almost sacred. There is a particular quiet that settles at the back of the plane, where anonymity mixes with routine. In that quiet, Evelyn allowed the smaller voice to speak. It told her that she had not called her sister in 3 weeks. It told her that the rent was due in 5 days. It told her that the note in her pocket might not be from her mother at all. The softer voice was not urgent. It was like winter tapping on the window, persistent and cold. She opened the small metal locker where the crew kept personal items, and for a moment imagined a different life. A home with a narrow garden, the sound of a radio playing hymns in the morning, a long table where biscuits cooled under a cloth. That life felt possible when she blinked hard enough. When she opened her locker again, it was only dark plastic and a packet of mints. As the cabin doors closed and the hum of the engines reached its regular breathing, passengers settled into pockets of motionless expectation. Evelyn walked the aisles once more, checking latches and smiles. Her movements were small pledges of order in a place designed for movement. The plane lifted a smooth, inevitable arc. As the city fell away below them like a map with certain places already erased, Evelyn felt the familiar mix of control and surrender. The higher they rose, the more defined the small world of the cabin became, its own little society, its own rules. From somewhere beyond the practice steps and the careful words, something waited. The hint of it was not loud, a duty not yet called, a choice that would be pressed into her palms like a hot coin. The narrator kept this quiet, letting the morning settle like dust, while the other voice, the one that lived in Evelyn's pockets, folded the note once more and pressed it closer. "Remember who you are," the word said. The plane rose, and with it the slow, steady drum of consequences that build beneath ordinary days. It began like any other flight, routine, controlled, perfectly ordinary. The kind of day Evelyn believed she could glide through without consequence. But it was always the ordinary days that cracked the deepest. 2 hours into the flight, she noticed them, a couple seated halfway down the main cabin, by the window. The man was tall, composed, his posture dignified in a way that didn't need attention to command respect. The woman beside him had a quiet grace, her eyes soft but observant, the kind that could strip pretense without a word. They were both dressed simply yet elegantly, like people who understood that refinement wasn't about price but presence. They smiled at her when she passed with the beverage cart. A polite, unassuming smile. And yet, something about them lingered in Evelyn's mind long after she'd moved on. Maybe it was how still they sat in a sea of restless passengers. Or maybe it was the hush that followed when others noticed them. A hush laced with the uneasy whispers that sometimes travel faster than truth. A woman across the aisle leaned to her husband and muttered, not quietly enough, "They must have been upgraded by mistake." Her husband grunted, "Probably. They don't look like they belong in this section." Evelyn heard it. She wished she hadn't. She had heard versions of that same sentence her entire career, sometimes directed at other passengers, sometimes at herself when she was new and her accent hadn't yet learned to hide its working-class roots. But now, standing between the cart and the couple, she felt something unfamiliar simmer beneath her professionalism. Not anger, exactly, something smaller, meaner, something that fed on all the little humiliations she had stored away over the years. The woman, the one by the window, caught Evelyn's eyes. "Excuse me," she said gently, her voice calm but assured. "May we have 2 glasses of champagne, please?" Evelyn hesitated, the smallest fraction of a second, before responding. "I'm afraid that's for premium class only, ma'am. I can offer you wine instead." The woman blinked, confusion softening her face. "Oh, I thought this was premium class," she said, smiling faintly, not defensive, just puzzled. The man turned his head toward Evelyn, his gaze steady but unreadable. "It is," he said quietly. "We booked these seats ourselves." Something in his tone, unbothered, dignified, calm, rubbed against the raw edges of Evelyn's composure. Her training told her to smile, to correct gently, to let it pass. But the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Sometimes there's a mix-up with online bookings," she said, her voice smooth but colder than intended. "I'll double-check your tickets." The woman's smile faltered. "Please do." Evelyn wheeled the cart away, the sound of rattling bottles and clinking glasses louder than before. She hated herself for how her chest burned. She wasn't proud of the suspicion that had crept into her tone. She told herself it wasn't personal. She told herself she was just following procedure. But something about the couple's quiet dignity had unsettled her, made her aware of her own hidden resentments, her own tired need to feel in control of something, anything. When she reached the galley, she pulled out the flight manifest and scanned the seating list. Their names were right there, Mr. and Mrs. Charles and Naomi Reed. Seat numbers 14A and 14B. Premium confirmed. No errors. No mix-up. No excuse. Her stomach dropped with the weight of that realization. She'd made a mistake, a small one, maybe. But in her line of work, small mistakes could grow teeth. Before she could decide what to do, Mark Hale appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. "You all right?" he asked, glancing at her face. She nodded too quickly. "Fine. Just double-checking a seating issue." He frowned. "Something serious?" She hesitated. "No. Just verifying a pair of passengers. I thought they might have been assigned incorrectly." Mark's expression shifted, barely noticeable, but enough for Evelyn to catch it. That flicker of silent judgment, the kind supervisors saved for employees who caused unnecessary problems. "Be careful, Evelyn," he said softly. "We've had complaints recently about tone. Remember, every passenger counts." Tone. The word bit deeper than he knew. She nodded again, swallowing the sting. Understood. But when she returned to the cabin, something inside her resisted apology. She approached the Reeds with the same professional calm, holding 2 glasses of champagne on a tray. "My apologies for the delay," she said, setting the glasses before them. "We had to confirm our catering availability." Naomi smiled graciously, though her eyes held a quiet question Evelyn could feel but not answer. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate it." Charles raised his glass slightly. "To smooth skies," he said to his wife, and they both drank. As Evelyn turned to walk away, she caught a few murmurs from passengers nearby. Words like attitude, overreacting, entitled. She knew gossip when she heard it. The story was already changing shape, already slipping out of her control. The rest of the flight passed with mechanical precision, yet the air felt heavy with something unsaid. Every time she passed the reeds, Evelyn sensed their calm like a mirror reflecting her unease. She wanted to apologize properly, but something, a mixture of pride and fear, kept her from it. Pride told her she was being judged unfairly. Fear told her that any wrong word could end her career. Hours later, as the flight neared descent, turbulence rippled through the cabin. The seatbelt signs blinked on. Evelyn braced herself by the galley wall as the plane dipped once, twice. Someone gasped. Trays rattled. But amid the small panic, she saw Mark speaking to another attendant, his expression tense, his voice hushed. He beckoned her closer. "Customs just radioed," he said. "Security detail waiting at the gate. Some passengers on board flagged as priority clearance. Diplomatic transport, apparently." Evelyn blinked. "Diplomatic? On this flight?" He nodded. "Yes. They didn't specify who, but it's confidential." Her stomach turned cold. She already knew. As the plane landed and taxied toward the terminal, Evelyn's heartbeat thudded in her ears. She went through the landing procedures mechanically, but her thoughts spun toward that single pair of passengers, the couple who had asked for champagne, whose calm had unnerved her. When the seatbelt sign dimmed and the doors opened, 2 security officers in dark suits stepped into the cabin. They moved with the deliberate confidence of people who didn't explain themselves. Evelyn's gaze darted instinctively toward the Reeds. The officers approached them directly. "Mr. and Mrs. Reed," one of them said with professional warmth, "your transport is ready. Ambassador Taylor sends his regards." The murmur that spread through the cabin was electric. Heads turned. Phones lifted, pretending not to record. Evelyn felt every heartbeat in her throat. Naomi Reed turned her gaze toward her, eyes steady but soft. Not angry, not cruel, just quietly aware. "Thank you for your service," she said simply. "We appreciate your care during the flight." Then they walked past her, escorted by the officers, leaving behind an air that felt colder than before. Evelyn's chest tightened. She wanted to disappear into the carpet. Mark's look from the galley door was enough to make her stomach twist. Half pity, half reprimand. As the last passenger disembarked, Evelyn stood in the now empty cabin, hands trembling slightly. The hum of the engines faded, replaced by the quiet hiss of air conditioning. She pulled the folded note from her pocket again. "Remember who you are. Don't lose the uniform." She stared at it for a long moment, realizing she might already have done exactly that. But what she didn't know, what the narrator could see, though she could not, was that the Reed story was not finished with her. Beneath their calm smiles and diplomat credentials, something darker lingered. A quiet secret bound to her by more than chance. This flight had not been an accident. And Evelyn Clark was about to find out that the sky she worked beneath was full of hidden debts. And one of them had just come due. When Evelyn walked out of the crew terminal that evening, the city felt colder than it should have been. The air pressed against her skin like judgment, heavy, constant, unrelenting. She moved quickly toward the parking lot, avoiding the glances of coworkers. Her mind replayed every frame of the flight, the champagne glasses, the whispered remarks, the Reed's quiet dignity, and the look in Naomi's eyes when she said, "Thank you for your service." It wasn't a rebuke. That was what made it worse. It was grace, and grace always hurt more when you knew you didn't deserve it. By the time she reached her car, the day had caught up to her. She sat behind the wheel, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her uniform looked perfect, pressed, and spotless. But her eyes, those were different. There was a tremor there. A question she couldn't quite answer. When did I become this? Her phone buzzed. A message from Mark. I need to speak tomorrow morning. HR wants your statement about the passenger complaint. Her stomach tightened. She hadn't known there was a complaint yet. But of course there was. Someone must have said something. Perhaps one of the passengers who'd overheard her tone, or worse, someone who'd posted about it online. It didn't take much for an incident to turn into a headline these days. She drove home in silence, the city lights washing through her windshield like slow tears. Her apartment was small, a single-bedroom space filled with a quiet company of things that didn't talk back, a worn couch, a flickering lamp, and an unwatered plant that leaned toward the window as if trying to escape. She changed into sweatpants, sat at the table, and unfolded the note again. Remember who you are. Don't lose the uniform. The handwriting still felt familiar, though she couldn't say why. It wasn't her mother's, she knew that now. But it wasn't random either. The ink was faintly smudged, as if written in haste, or written by someone who didn't want to be traced. She turned it over. Nothing on the back. But as she stared at it under the kitchen light, a thought came, absurd, but sharp enough to cut through her exhaustion. What if this wasn't a warning? What if it was a reminder from someone who knew what was coming? Her mind went back to the Reeds. The way they looked at her, not angry, not smug, just aware. People like that didn't stumble into commercial flights by accident. Diplomats had schedules, private transport, protocols. Why had they been there in her section on that flight? She went to bed late, sleeping thick with half-formed dreams. The hum of an engine, the echo of Naomi's calm voice, the sound of champagne being poured like confession. The next morning at the airline office, the walls were white enough to sting the eyes. HR interviews always smelled of sanitizer and polite disapproval. Mark stood outside the conference room, his jaw tight, his clipboard pressed against his chest. Evelyn, he said quietly, let's just keep it factual. The Reeds didn't file the complaint themselves. It came from a passenger who claims they overheard a discriminatory exchange. The company has to follow procedure. Her throat went dry. So what happens now? You give your version. Then we wait. She nodded. And if the Reeds contact us? Mark's eyes flickered. They already did. Evelyn's heart skipped. They did. He exhaled slowly. They sent an email directly to the corporate. Said they didn't want to escalate anything. They even praised your professionalism after the initial misunderstanding. Said you handled yourself well. She blinked. They defended me? Mark gave a small, incredulous shrug. Apparently. I've never seen anything like it. But corporations still want documentation. You know how it goes. She nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. Why would they defend her? Especially after how she treated them? Unless they wanted something. Unless this wasn't kindness at all, but bait. That thought followed her through the meeting, through the questions about tone and procedure, through the scripted apologies and the forced smiles. By the time she left the building, her nerves were raw. At the exit, she saw something that made her stop. A black sedan parked near the curb. Windows tinted, engine running. It wasn't unusual, except for the driver. A woman, dark hair neatly tied, sunglasses hiding her eyes. But something about her posture was alert, watchful. Evelyn hesitated, pretending to check her phone. The driver lifted her gaze briefly, just enough for Evelyn to see her face. Naomi Reed. Their eyes met through the glass. Naomi smiled, faintly, politely, and then drove away. For a long time, Evelyn didn't move. That evening, she sat on her balcony with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the city below, the traffic, the restless noise, the pulse of lights that never really went dark. The air carried the smell of rain and jet fuel from the nearby airport. Her phone lay beside her on the small table, screen dark. When it finally buzzed again, the message was from an unknown number. "You look tired today. We should talk." N. Her chest tightened. She didn't reply at first. She didn't know how Naomi had her number, perhaps from the flight records, perhaps through someone at corporate. But curiosity was a dangerous gravity, and Evelyn had always been drawn to what frightened her. She typed slowly. "About what?" The reply came instantly. "About things you don't yet know you're part of." They met the next day in a quiet coffee shop near the consulate district. Naomi arrived alone, dressed in a cream coat that made her seem both fragile and formidable. She smiled when she saw Evelyn, that same soft, measured smile that could disarm a person before they realized they were being studied. "I didn't mean to startle you," Naomi said as she sat down. "But there's something I need to explain, and something I need to ask." Evelyn tried to steady her breathing. "You could have gone through corporate if this was about the complaint." Naomi shook her head. "It's not about the complaint. That's done. This is personal." Evelyn's voice faltered. "Personal." Naomi leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "The note in your pocket, who gave it to you?" Evelyn froze. "How do you know about that?" Naomi's expression didn't change. "Because it wasn't meant to reach you by accident." The air between them thickened. Evelyn searched Naomi's face, looking for some hint of a game, a trick. "What are you talking about?" Naomi sighed softly. "My husband and I weren't on that flight by chance. We were tracking someone, a leak inside the airline's diplomatic transport network. Documents have been going missing. Messages intercepted. Someone's been passing passenger details to private contractors for profit. We were told the leak used coded notes, left in uniforms, luggage, supply cabinets." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "You think I'm involved?" Naomi shook her head gently. "No, I think you're caught in the middle." Evelyn stared down at her trembling hands. "So that note?" "It wasn't from us," Naomi said quietly. "But whoever sent it wanted you to find it, which means they know you, or they're using you." Evelyn's thoughts spiraled, Mark's careful eyes, the complaint that vanished too easily, the way HR brushed past the details, the way Naomi had found her number so effortlessly. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "Because you still have something they want," Naomi said. "Something you haven't realized yet." Evelyn swallowed hard. "What is it?" Naomi's gaze softened. "You'll know when they come for it." That night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart a frantic drumbeat beneath the quiet. Every sound outside made her flinch, a car door, a phone vibration, the whisper of wind against glass. She replayed Naomi's words until they tangled. "You're caught in the middle. Something they want. You'll know when they come for it." The note still sat on her bedside table, creased and harmless looking. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it, how a single scrap of paper had unstitched the quiet fabric of her life. Somewhere between exhaustion and fear, she realized something else. The note wasn't folded the way she remembered. Someone had unfolded it, then folded it again differently. Her breath caught. She looked toward her apartment door. Locked, but the air felt wrong. She got up, checked the latch, and checked the windows. Nothing disturbed, yet the sense of being watched was unmistakable. Outside, the hum of an idling car echoed faintly. She moved toward the window. A dark sedan sat across the street, the same model as before. But this time, the driver wasn't Naomi. It was Mark, and he wasn't watching the street. He was watching her. The betrayal, when it came, didn't feel sudden. It felt like recognition, as if she had been walking toward it her whole life without realizing the ground beneath her was already cracking. The next morning, Evelyn's world began to tilt, not violently, but with the slow, deliberate motion of something that had been shifting for a long time beneath the surface. The first sign was small. She woke to find her phone on the kitchen counter instead of beside her bed. She didn't remember moving it there. The screen lit up with 3 missed calls from an unknown number and a voicemail that began with silence, then a faint, rhythmic sound, like someone breathing through cloth. Then, a man's voice, low and measured. "You shouldn't have met her." Evelyn froze. The voice wasn't Mark's, but there was something in its cadence, a restrained authority, that reminded her of him. She played it again. The same warning. "You shouldn't have met her." Then the line clicked dead. She sat at the table, clutching her mug, her mind whirring through possibilities. Naomi had said she was caught in the middle. Now someone was making sure she stayed there. By the time she reached the crew terminal later that morning, the world outside felt sharp, every shadow a little too deliberate. Her footsteps echoed down the hall toward the staff lounge, where Mark was already waiting with 2 coffees. "Rough night?" he asked, his tone casual. Too casual. She hesitated. "You could say that." He handed her a cup. "You've had a long week. The complaint's closed, by the way. Corporate's dropping it." Just like that. Just like that. He smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. "The Reeds cleared you personally. Apparently, they insisted the airline issue an apology to you for the misunderstanding." Her hand tightened around the coffee cup. "An apology? That doesn't make sense." Mark leaned back in his chair. "Neither does half the paperwork I process. But hey, take the win." Evelyn watched him carefully. There was something rehearsed about his tone, something faintly patronizing, as if he were defusing a bomb. "Mark," she said slowly, "how did they even get my number?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Passengers like them? They have access to everything. Don't overthink it." But his eyes darted, just once, to her bag. The same bag that held the folded note. She excused herself quickly, murmuring something about needing to check on inventory, but her pulse throbbed in her throat. She walked into the galley and shut the door behind her, breathing hard. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. She opened her bag and pulled out the note. It was still folded, but the crease had deepened, as if someone else had held it, not once, but several times. And there along the edge, faint but visible under the fluorescent light, was an imprint. Numbers. She held it closer. Not random digits, coordinates. That night, Evelyn sat at her small kitchen table again, laptop open, the screen throwing cold light across her face. She typed the coordinates into a map search engine. They pointed to a warehouse near the docks, abandoned on paper, but satellite view showed something else: movement, lights, trucks at odd hours. Her stomach clenched. She shouldn't have looked. She knew that. But the note hadn't been a warning. It was a breadcrumb. Someone had meant for her to find it. She remembered Naomi's voice. "You still have something they want." If the coordinates were what they were after, then she was holding a secret she didn't even understand. She was about to close her laptop when she noticed the small blinking icon in the corner of her screen. Her webcam was on. Her hand flew to the camera, covering it. The screen froze, then went black. And then her phone buzzed. A message from Naomi. "If you're reading this, don't go to the docks. They're watching you. You're not who you think you are." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "You're not who you think you are." She stared at the message, unable to breathe. Then, almost instinctively, she checked her reflection on the dark screen. The same face she'd seen every morning for 34 years. The same brown hair, the same tired eyes. What did Naomi mean? She didn't sleep. By dawn, exhaustion felt like glass under her skin. She went to work early, hoping routine might ground her. But even the terminal seemed different, quieter, as if the walls were listening. Mark was waiting by the staff gate again. "Evelyn," he said, voice low, "come with me. There's been an incident." The world shrank to the sound of her heartbeat. What kind of incident? He didn't answer. He led her to an empty conference room. The blinds were drawn, the air recycled and stale. 2 men in dark suits sat at the table, their posture government-level calm. "Ms. Clark," one of them said, gesturing for her to sit. "We're with the Diplomatic Security Service." We're investigating an internal leak within the airline's international division. Her mouth went dry. Is this about the Reeds? She asked. They exchanged a look. You've been in contact with them? She hesitated. Briefly. And did they tell you what their role was? They said they were tracking a leak. The older agent leaned forward. That's interesting. Because there are no records of any Reeds in the diplomatic corps. No passports, no service records, no security clearances. The people you met weren't diplomats, Miss Clark. The words hit like turbulence. That's impossible. I saw their credentials. Security cleared them. Forgery, the agent said simply. Very convincing. We've been tracking them for months. They're private contractors, former intelligence assets gone rogue. They infiltrate transport networks, identify personnel with access to sensitive cargo, and use them as couriers without their knowledge. You, Ms. Clark, were one of their targets. Evelyn's chest fell hollow. I don't understand. I don't have access to anything important. The agent placed a small envelope on the table. The note. You've seen it before. She nodded slowly. It wasn't a warning, he said. It was an activation signal. We found identical notes in the lockers of several staff members tied to contraband shipments. We believe the Reeds planted it on you to trigger a chain reaction, to make you dig, to make you look guilty. Her head spun. They wanted me to look guilty. They needed a distraction. While you were being investigated, while the airline's attention was on you, they were able to move a diplomatic cargo container through customs without inspection. Whatever they were after, it's gone now. Evelyn's hands trembled. So why tell me now? The agent exchanged another glance with his partner. Because we think one of your supervisors helped them. The world went silent. Mark Hale, the agent said. He's been under quiet observation for weeks. Financial inconsistencies, unexplained travel, encrypted emails. We believe he's their contact on the inside. Evelyn's throat closed. That's not possible. Mark's. He's been with the company for years. He's strict, meticulous. And very good at pretending, the agent interrupted. We have evidence he met the Reeds 3 times off record. 2 days before your flight, and once after. Her pulse roared in her ears. After? Yes, the agent said quietly. The night you saw his car outside your apartment. She felt the room tilt again. He was watching me. He was making sure you didn't realize what was really going on. They needed you to believe you were the problem. That way, when the story leaked, you'd take the fall, and he'd stay clean. Evelyn pressed her hands to her face. 1,000 tiny moments flashed through her mind. Mark's calm warnings, his careful tone, his false kindness. Every small reassurance now sounded like control. When she looked up again, the agents were watching her closely. We'll need your cooperation, one of them said. If he contacts you, don't engage. Record everything. We'll handle the rest. She nodded numbly, but as she left the room, one thought kept clawing at her. If the Reeds weren't real diplomats, why did Naomi try to protect me afterward? That evening, back in her apartment, Evelyn sat in the dark, every muscle taut with disbelief. Rain streaked the windows like fingerprints. Her phone vibrated once, then again, a new message. They lied to you. Mark isn't a traitor. He's the warning you ignored. N. A chill ran down her spine. She typed back with shaking fingers. Then who is? The reply came seconds later. Check your personnel file. You'll see why they chose you. She hesitated, then logged into her employee portal. Her file opened, name, position, history. But then, at the bottom, something caught her eye. An attached document labeled background verification, report restricted. She clicked it open, and there under family history was a single line she had never seen before. Biological father, Charles Reed, diplomatic service, deceased. Her breath caught. The screen blurred. Every memory, every assumption she had built her life around cracked in an instant. Naomi's words echoed again. You're not who you think you are. Charles Reed. Not a stranger. Not a random passenger. Her father. And Naomi Reed, not his wife. His handler. The Reeds hadn't chosen her flight by accident. They hadn't been tracking her company. They'd been tracking her. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It poured like the sky itself was unraveling, each drop smearing the city into something blurry and untrustworthy. Evelyn sat by her window, sleepless, her body numb from hours of disbelief. The name on the screen still burned in her mind. Charles Reed. Her father. The man she'd been told died before she turned 2. A ghost with no face, no voice. Now suddenly, his name surfaced like a secret clawing out of the grave. She hadn't told anyone. Not the agents. Not even Mark. Especially not Mark. Every instinct screamed at her to confront him, but another voice, quieter, older, almost primal, told her to wait. Watch. Listen. By morning, she made a decision. She would go back to work. Pretend nothing had changed. The only way to uncover the truth was to step back into the lie. The terminal buzzed as usual, rolling carts, clipped radio chatter, and the soft hiss of jet engines outside. Everything was normal, but every sound now carried weight. Evelyn's gaze tracked every movement, every familiar face. Mark stood near the security gate, checking rosters, his usual crisp authority intact. When he saw her, he smiled, that same careful, professional curve of the lips. "Morning," he said, as if nothing had happened. "Rough couple of days?" She forced a small nod. "I'm fine. Just tired." "Understandable." He lowered his voice. "I heard they spoke to you." "The agents." Her pulse quickened. "They did. And they think the Reeds are frauds. That they used me." He studied her for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he leaned in slightly. "And you believe that?" "I don't know what to believe." Mark sighed, not impatiently, but like someone carrying a weight he couldn't put down. "Then let me make something clear. You're in over your head, Evelyn. Walk away before this buries you." She swallowed hard. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and walked off toward the maintenance wing. Evelyn stood frozen. A warning from the man she was told was a traitor. Or maybe from the only person still trying to protect her. She had no idea which was true anymore. Later that day, Evelyn found herself drawn to the archives room, a cramped, windowless space filled with old flight manifests and employee files. She told herself she was looking for clarity, but deep down she knew she was looking for him, her father. After an hour of searching, she found it, a single, yellowed personnel log from 27 years ago. Charles Reed had been in the Airline's Diplomatic Transport Division, just like she was now. His record ended abruptly, status, missing during assignment, presumed dead. But there was a note stapled to the bottom. Confidential, clearance required for further details. Contact M. Hale. Mark. The paper trembled in her hand. He'd been with the airline long enough to have handled her father's case. He'd known. All this time, he'd known who she was. That night, Evelyn couldn't bring herself to go home. The silence there felt dangerous, full of listening walls. Instead, she sat in her car in the far corner of the employee lot, the hum of rain masking her thoughts. She replayed everything. The Reed's cryptic words, the agent's version of the story, Mark's warning. Each piece contradicted the last, forming a mosaic of lies that no longer fit together. Then her phone buzzed again. A new message. "You don't have time. He's moving it tonight." The container. The sender was unknown. Evelyn's breath caught. She didn't need to ask what it meant. The diplomatic cargo. The one the agents said had slipped through customs. The one that made her a target. She opened her map app. The same coordinates as before the docks. Her chest tightened. She wanted to ignore it, to hand it all over to the authorities, but curiosity, or maybe obsession, had its claws too deep in her now. She started the engine. The docks at night were a different world, All fog and sodium lights, cranes looming like giants in the mist. The rhythmic clank of chains echoed through the empty expanse. Evelyn parked behind a stack of cargo containers and killed the headlights. She stepped out, the cold wind slicing through her jacket. Every instinct screamed at her to leave. But she moved forward anyway, boots crunching on wet gravel, drawn toward the faint glow of a floodlight in the distance. That's when she saw him, Mark, standing near a black SUV, talking to someone, a woman in a trench coat. The light caught the woman's face, and Evelyn's stomach twisted. Naomi Reed. Alive. Naomi handed Mark a folder. He flipped through it, then pulled something small from his coat, a USB drive. She watched him hand it over before the two separated, Naomi disappearing into the shadows. Evelyn's breath came in shallow bursts. Every story, every lie collided at once. The agents had said Mark was their contact. Naomi had claimed he was the warning. But now they are working together. She took a step back, and her heel struck a loose metal rod. It clattered. Mark turned instantly. His eyes found hers across the distance. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he started walking toward her. Evelyn spun and ran. The gravel was slick, her shoes sliding as she weaved between containers. Behind her, Mark's voice echoed through the fog, calm, commanding, terrifying. Evelyn, stop. You don't understand what you're doing. She didn't stop. She reached the end of the lane, heart hammering, and ducked behind a rusted storage unit. Footsteps grew louder, closer. Her phone vibrated again, another message. Don't run. Let him find you. He's not who you think he is. Tears burned in her eyes. She didn't know what was real anymore. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a shadow moved around the corner. Slow, deliberate. Mark stepped into view, hands raised. Evelyn, listen to me. I wasn't lying. They're using you. Your father's work didn't die with him. It's buried in you. The code, the data. What are you talking about? She whispered. He took another step. You were part of the program, Evelyn. You're not just his daughter. You were the insurance. A genetic key. That's why Naomi's back. They need you to unlock what your father hid. Her mind reeled. That's insane. Is it? You've been having blackouts, haven't you? Gaps in memory? Dreams that don't feel like dreams. She froze. How do you? I've been trying to protect you, he said softly. But the moment you found that note, you activated every tracker tied to your name. They know where you are right now. A low hum filled the air, distant engines. She turned and saw headlights cutting through the fog. Black vehicles. 3. No markings. Mark reached for her hand. Come with me. Now. Or you'll never know the truth. Evelyn hesitated, caught between the man who might be her betrayer and the truth that might destroy her. Please, he said, his voice breaking for the first time. Your father trusted me to keep you safe. The approaching vehicles screeched to a halt. Armed figures spilled out, flashlights slicing through the mist. Mark grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a container. Bullets ripped through the air. Metal shrieked as ricochets sparked around them. Evelyn covered her head, trembling, as Mark fired back. This isn't what it looks like, he shouted. They're not DSS. They're hired retrieval. The ground shook as one of the vehicles exploded, fire painting the fog in violent orange. Evelyn's ears rang. She couldn't tell who was shooting at whom anymore. When she finally looked up, Mark was gone. Only the echo of his voice lingered. Find Naomi. She has the other half. And as the sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn realized that whatever secret her father left behind had now pulled her into a war, one where trust was poison and truth might be fatal. From the airport to the docks, and now to the abandoned control tower on the outskirts of the airfield, the same electric fury rolled across the sky, tearing at the horizon like something furious had been unchained. Evelyn gripped the wheel as lightning tore through the night, illuminating the crumbling structure ahead, the one Naomi Reed had told her to find. It was nearly midnight when she arrived. Wind battered the metal panels, making the whole building groan like it remembered things it didn't want to. Evelyn climbed out, soaked, every nerve in her body whispering that she shouldn't be here. But that quiet, reasonable voice, the one that used to keep her safe, had been drowned out by the need to know. She pushed the door open. The inside smelled of rust and rainwater. Dust-covered monitors flickered with intermittent static, powered by a generator somewhere below. In the center of the room stood Naomi, pale under the harsh fluorescent light, her eyes hollow but fierce. "You came," Naomi said. Her voice was calm, almost relieved. "You sent the message." Evelyn's voice trembled with exhaustion. "You said you had answers." Naomi nodded slowly. "I do, but you may wish you hadn't asked for them." Lightning flashed again, casting long, skeletal shadows across the walls. For a moment, Evelyn saw a ghost of herself reflected in the cracked glass. Uniform drenched, eyes rimmed red. A woman who had spent too long being lied to. "Tell me about my father," she demanded. Naomi's eyes softened. Charles Reed wasn't just a diplomat. He was part of a covert intelligence exchange embedded in diplomatic cargo routes. The program was called Aegis. Its purpose was to move data, coded within biological signatures, across borders under diplomatic protection. Evelyn frowned, shaking her head. "I don't understand." Naomi stepped closer. "Your father was brilliant. He found a way to hide encryption keys within genetic sequences, human DNA. He used his own, but before he disappeared, he altered something else." Evelyn's breath caught. "He altered mine." Naomi nodded. "You were the failsafe, a living key. When the project was compromised, Charles vanished, and those files, the Aegis codes, went dark. You've been unknowingly carrying them your entire life." Evelyn's knees weakened. "And Mark? What was he?" Naomi hesitated. "He was your father's handler. When Charles vanished, Mark stayed behind to ensure you never fell into the wrong hands. He was supposed to keep you hidden out of the system." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Then why was he meeting with you?" Naomi looked away. "Because the people funding this, the ones who killed your father, are inside the agency. The moment you activated that note, every buried file resynced to your identity. They knew where you were." "You mean you knew?" Evelyn snapped. Naomi's eyes flashed with guilt. "I was trying to stop them, Evelyn. But Mark, he's not who you think he is anymore." Before Evelyn could ask what that meant, a low hum filled the air. Engines approaching. She moved to the window just as a convoy of black vehicles cut through the rain, headlights burning white through the storm. Naomi grabbed her arm. "They found us. You have to trust me now." "I don't trust anyone," Evelyn said, backing away. A new voice echoed from the stairwell. "Then trust me." Mark stepped into the light, rain glistening on his jacket, pistol drawn, but aimed at the floor. Naomi tensed instantly. "Don't you take another step." "Naomi," he said, his voice low, tired. "You're out of moves." She laughed bitterly. "So you finally stopped pretending to be her savior?" Mark's eyes shifted to Evelyn. "She's lying. Naomi's been using you to decrypt what your father hid. She works for the same people who took him." "That's a lie." Naomi shouted. "Your father died because of him." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Stop it. Both of you." Lightning cracked overhead, thunder shaking the building. In that strobe of light, Evelyn saw both of them clearly. Naomi trembling but determined, Mark steady but haunted. Two different truths. Two different betrayals. "Tell me the truth." Evelyn screamed. "Who killed my father?" Neither spoke at first. Then Mark said quietly, "I did." The words dropped like a stone. Naomi froze, her gun lowering an inch. Evelyn's breath hitched. Mark took a step forward, eyes burning with regret. "Not by choice. He made me." Charles knew Aegis had been compromised. He begged me to make it look real, to erase him before they could extract the data from you. I thought I was saving him. Evelyn felt dizzy. Saving him? You shot him, Mark. I didn't kill him, Mark said. I staged it. He disappeared with help from people I trusted. But the ones who funded Naomi's team, they found him first. Naomi's voice broke into a whisper. You're lying. We found his body. Mark shook his head. You found what they wanted you to find. Charles Reed is alive. The air left the room. Evelyn staggered back, her entire world splintering at once. Alive. Yes, Mark said. And he's waiting for you to finish what he started. That's why they're coming. They need you to unlock the last sequence before he can. Naomi's face went pale. You fool. If she does that, they'll have access to every black file in Aegis. It'll collapse diplomatic immunity worldwide. Mark raised his weapon toward Naomi. She doesn't have a choice. Evelyn's scream tore through the storm. Stop. Naomi fired first. The shot grazed Mark's shoulder. He stumbled, fired back. Glass shattered. Sparks flew. Evelyn ducked behind a console, heart hammering as the room erupted into chaos. When she lifted her head again, Naomi lay against the wall, clutching her side. Mark stood over her, gun still shaking. Mark, Evelyn shouted, rushing forward. Stop, she's done. Mark hesitated, pain twisting across his face. She'll never stop. None of them will. Evelyn knelt beside Naomi, blood soaked through her coat, her lips trembling. Evelyn, she gasped. The data, it's not what they told you. It's not a weapon. It's proof. Proof of what your father uncovered, the corruption, the disappearances. Mark's orders were never to protect you. They were to silence you if the codes ever surfaced. Mark froze. Don't listen. But Evelyn was already moving. The note, the one that had started all of this, had fallen from her pocket. She picked it up, now damp, barely legible. But beneath the ink was something else, a faint holographic mark glowing under the light. She held it toward the console. The mark flickered, and suddenly the dead monitors hummed to life. Lines of encrypted code filled the screens, scrolling like a heartbeat. A new file opened at the center. Aegis Protocol, Final Transfer. Authorization, Evelyn Clark. Evelyn, don't, Mark shouted. She pressed enter. A surge of light filled the room, a pulse of data transmitting across every encrypted network. Evelyn's father's voice, faint and weary, played through the speakers. If you're hearing this, my daughter, it means the truth is finally free. They'll call it treason. But remember, silence serves power, not peace. Evelyn's eyes flooded with tears. Mark's expression collapsed into something between awe and despair. You just ended everything, he whispered. No, she said softly, watching the transmission complete. I ended their control. Outside, sirens wailed, growing closer. Naomi exhaled a shuddering breath, eyes glassy. You did it, your father would be proud. Evelyn squeezed her hand as Naomi went still. Mark dropped his gun and fell to his knees. You don't understand what you've unleashed. Evelyn turned toward him, her face pale but resolute. Maybe not, but I finally understand what my father meant. That truth has to cost something, or it's not true at all. Lightning split the sky again, casting her in stark, trembling light, the daughter of a dead man who wasn't dead, the keeper of a secret that no longer belonged to anyone. And as dawn broke through the storm, Evelyn walked out of the tower into the wind, the world behind her burning with consequences, the horizon ahead trembling with the weight of freedom. The morning after the storm, the world looked like it had been scrubbed clean, but not forgiven. The rain had stopped, yet the tarmac outside the control tower still glistened with a sheen of memory. Cranes stood motionless in the mist, and the air carried the hollow quiet of a battlefield after surrender. Evelyn stood at the edge of it all, her soaked uniform clinging to her like a second skin. Every inch of her body ached, not from wounds, but from the weight of everything she'd finally uncovered. The agency's vehicles were gone. The sirens, too. Only the echoes of gunfire and the faint smell of burnt circuitry remained. Naomi Reed was dead. Mark Hale was alive, barely. He sat against the crumbling wall, pale, a bandage pressed to his shoulder where Evelyn had stopped the bleeding hours before. For the first time since she'd met him, Mark looked small. Humans. She approached him quietly, her shoes squelching in the wet dirt. "You should have told me the truth," she said, her voice calm now, stripped of rage. Mark's eyes were dull, rimmed with exhaustion. "Would you have believed me?" Evelyn crouched in front of him. "No," she admitted. "But maybe that's not the point. Maybe it's not about belief. It's about choice." He gave a weak smile, more a grimace. "Your father said the same thing once. He said the truth isn't something you find. It's something you decide to stop hiding." Evelyn looked out the broken window toward the horizon. The sun was rising slowly through the fog, bleeding pale gold over the city. The whole world felt suspended, waiting. "He's alive, isn't he?" Mark hesitated. "He was." She turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "He made contact through the fail-safe you activated," Mark said softly. "Right before the transmission went live. He thanked me for keeping you safe and told me not to follow." Her throat tightened. "So he's out there somewhere, watching." "Maybe. Maybe not." Mark coughed, a trace of blood in his hand. "You freed his work, Evelyn. That's all he ever wanted. Now the entire world has seen what Aegis was hiding. The kidnappings, the assassinations, the false peace treaties. The diplomatic immunity they used as a weapon. You exposed them all." Evelyn's chest tightened. "And what about me? What happens now?" He looked at her, eyes almost kind. "You disappear. For your own safety. They'll hunt for someone to blame, and they'll start with you." She wanted to laugh, but no sound came. The truth had cost her everything. Her job, her home, her peace. But she also felt something she hadn't in years. Clarity. A painful, almost holy stillness. "I can't hide anymore," she said. "Then what will you do?" Evelyn stared at the horizon again, where the sun broke free from the last ragged cloud. "Live with it," she whispered. "Live with what I've done, and what it means." By noon, the authorities had arrived, not agents, but journalists. Dozens of them. The leak had gone global. Screens in the nearby terminals flickered with headlines. "Aegis exposed. Global intelligence network under fire. Diplomatic immunity program revealed as cover for covert operations." Names scrolled endlessly across the screens. Governments disavowed, officials arrested, secret prisons uncovered. Evelyn's father's name appeared only once, Charles Reed, presumed deceased. But his daughter's name wasn't there at all. Mark was taken away in an unmarked ambulance. He didn't resist. Before he left, he reached for her hand. "For what it's worth," he murmured, "your father loved you. Everything he did to give you a life outside the shadows." Evelyn squeezed his hand gently. "Then why does it still feel like I'm standing in one?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Days later, Evelyn sat in a small church outside the city, the kind of place where no one asked names and everyone bowed their heads for their own reasons. The pew beneath her was cold, the candlelight flickering faintly against the wooden beams. She hadn't spoken to anyone since that night. No statements, no interviews. The world was tearing itself apart, trying to make sense of what she'd done. Some called her a hero, others a traitor. She didn't care for either title. Both were just words used to make sense of someone else's pain. The priest passed by and gave her a nod, mistaking her silence for prayer. Evelyn closed her eyes and let the quiet wrap around her. She could almost hear her father's voice again, not the recording this time, but the way she imagined it would sound if he were there beside her. "The truth doesn't set you free, Evelyn. It asks if you're strong enough to carry it." Her lips trembled. She whispered into the empty air, "I tried, Dad. I really did." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She thought of Naomi's last words. "It's proof, not a weapon." She thought of Mark's confession, his guilt that didn't erase his crimes. And she thought of herself, the woman who had spent years flying across skies, serving strangers, believing neutrality was safety. She finally understood why her father had hidden the truth in her blood. It wasn't because he trusted her to save the world. It was because he trusted her not to become it. Outside, children laughed in the courtyard. The sound startled her, bright and alive, echoing against the stone walls. Evelyn rose slowly, wiping her face. She stepped outside and watched them, running, shouting, playing beneath the pale sun. A little girl, no older than 6, tripped and fell. Evelyn instinctively rushed forward, helping her to her feet. The child smiled through tears and said softly, "Thank you, miss." It was such a small thing, but it undid her. She felt her throat close with emotion. "Be careful next time," Evelyn said gently. The girl nodded and ran back to her friends, leaving Evelyn standing there, a woman caught between grief and grace. For the first time in years, she smiled. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn disappeared from public life. Reports surfaced of her sightings, in Lisbon, in Oslo, once in a small border town near Romania, but nothing confirmed. Some said she joined a humanitarian network, helping refugees caught between the policies she'd exposed. Others claimed she worked under a new identity, passing quietly through airports as if reclaiming her old life in fragments. The truth, as it often did, remained unspoken. But somewhere, in a nameless cafe near the sea, a woman sat by the window, hair shorter now, face calm but unreadable. She stirred her coffee absently while reading a newspaper in a language that wasn't hers. On the last page, a small headline caught her eye. "Missing diplomat found alive in Northern Alps. Refuses to comment." Her hand froze. The coffee rippled slightly in the cup. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at the words until they blurred. Then she smiled, not with relief, not even joy, but with a quiet, fierce acceptance. That night, she walked along the beach as the tide came in, wind tugging at her coat. The moonlight shimmered across the waves, and she thought about everything she had lost and everything she had chosen to remember. The world would rebuild itself, just as it always did, pretending it hadn't almost fallen apart. But somewhere beneath the politics and noise, the truth lived on, raw and unpolished, carried by those who dared to hold it. Evelyn stopped and looked toward the horizon, where the sea met the stars. "Remember who you are," she whispered, the same words that had started it all. And for the first time, she finally did. The wind rose softly, lifting the hem of her coat. She turned away from the ocean and began walking inland, each step steady and sure, not escaping, not hiding, but simply moving forward. Because sometimes redemption wasn't about undoing the past. It was about learning to live with it and still choosing to begin again. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.